Hi and welcome to Yeshiva Hashem Be'aver. I'm Rabbi David Katz, and this is the Tehillim class in-depth series. The title for this class this week, The Territory of the Messiah, Mashiach. This is class number 7. By definition, we've gone through verses 1 through 6, and tonight is a bit different from protocol. We're actually going to do verses 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. As I was doing the preparation work, they were like dominoes. They just kept falling down one after another. The flow chart, we're going to go into the former 6 verses, very, 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 very short, like 1 or 2 words, just to get you a rhythm of what we've gone through. And what we're going to talk about, I mean, it's a lot of verses. There's an old saying that when you're learning Talmud, and let's say you're on the commentator Tosfos, it's on the rim of the Gemara of the Talmud. The idea is that when you see a short Tosfos, that's when you should pull your hair out, because that's going to be a hard one. And if you see a long Tosfos, people generally think, oh boy, now I got to do this. But that's actually the easier one. Much more fluid and linguistic. I got a more familiar nature. So this is really no different. We're doing 5 verses, but they're going to be like a long Tosfos. They're just going to flow. It's the little guys you got to worry about. The basic flow chart of what we're going to do is the expectations of the Messiah, from what he will create, what he will bring out, what he will do, and what the effect will be. In a sense, it's the territory of the Messiah, right? What will we see of his labor? What will be in the air? What happens to Israel? What happens to the rest of the world? You'll see as we go, it's a nice running flow illumination of, based on what we've covered, the expectations of King David placed upon King Solomon, assuming that he's taken aboard all of the precautions. Now he's going into battle, boom, boom, boom. What do we expect to see as a result of he who takes heed of King David? This class may, in fact, be very quick or very long. I'm not sure how it's going to go. Just depends on how it comes out. As I kept thinking it was going to be a long class in the preparation, but every time I went further, it just got shorter and shorter. Point being, the concepts this week are pretty self-explanatory. But they're essential. Don't think that they're any less essential. It's just, that's the whole point. When you hear it, you'll see that it is what it is. That's why we're calling the class The Territory of the Messiah. Verse number 1, King David tells King Solomon what he expects. Verse number 2, you need to be righteous in judgment. Verse number 3, there is the merit of the righteousness that you do, that you'll find peace in the world, and how to judge properly. It goes into verse 4. Now all of that is contained in verse 5. The judgment, the righteousness comes from the proper fear of heaven. In verse 6, as we did last week, that is the idea of speaking the Torah to the nations. Right? We said about the drip nozzle, the influence that comes down like water into the dusty floor where the seeds are buried, and the thirsty nature of the world, absorbing the words of wisdom, and sending over the articulation that the world thirsts. As the revelation comes to consciousness, the king is then putting out, almost like Windows and their updates. It's like you have Windows, and it works on a certain level, but you need that update to keep it going fresh and fast. So the king of Mount Zion is always updating the software, right? As humanity evolves and grows, Har Zion, the Mount Zion, the king, is always fulfilling the thirst of the nations, the people of the world, everybody. It all comes from him. He's the engine that makes it run. All right, here we go. This is now, we're caught up to speed. Let's go for verse number 7. I'm just going to read, I think all 5 verses just to give you a real flow. Verse 7. Flourish in his days may the righteous with abundant peace until there is no moon. Verse 8. May he dominate from sea to sea and from river to the ends of the earth. Verse 9. May before him kneel nobles, and his foes the dust may they lick. Verse 10. The kings of Tarshish and the isles, tribute may they return. The kings of Sheba and Seba, gifts may they offer. Verse number 11. Prostrate themselves before him, may all the kings, may all the nations serve him. All right, you see how it's kind of a general theme here, nothing so fantastic. I mean, the first verse was pretty fantastic, but there's not much to be said on that fantastic nature. So it's pretty straightforward. Okay, verse number 7, let's go to the details. I found some interesting remez or hints inside. If the commentator breaks up the first 3 words and the last 5 words. The first 3 words, the initial letters, Yud, Beit, Tzadik, Yifrach, Miyam of Tzadik. May in his days flourish the righteous. It's the opposite letters of Moses. Actually, it's the word deer, Tzvi. If you know my commentary on Song of Songs, or if you read Song of Songs in depth, you know that oftentimes King Solomon says, in regards to Hashem, may you go out like an idol or Tzvi, like these 2 types of deer. So Tzvi is one of the main characters of Song of Songs. In fact, in the very end, I think the idea is that the Mashiach and the redemption, it comes like Tzvi. The idea of the deer that comes at you when you're in the woods and a deer is charging, because of the natural camouflage, sometimes it's revealed and sometimes it isn't. So that's how the redemption is going to come. Sometimes we see nothing but light coming at us as if redemption is imminent, and then it turns to darkness. Well, darkness is not antithetical to the redemption in this respect. There are moments of revelation and there are moments of concealment. So the initial letters spell that Tzvi, and in opposite letters, the Yud, the Beit, and the Tzadik become Mem, Shin, Hey, which spells Moses. And the commentary basically says, Yirbo v'yifru tzadikim biyamav. Increase and made fruitful will tzadikim, the righteous, be in his days. Now, I saw in the Zohar on Shabbos, what is a tzaddik? We all have our definitions, and we've seen it means, this righteous teacher, that, this, that, and the next. The idea is that we know that the non-Jews are called the Chasidei Omos Ha'olam, the righteous of the nations. And it says that the word Chasidim, from the word Chesed, kindness, Chasidim comes from Chesed, the attribute of kindness. So one can make an argument that the non-Jews are called the Chasidim because they're particularly trying to emulate Abraham. Abraham really is their hero. He's the first Ger Tzedek. He's the first proper Ger. I mean, if there was ever a biblical hero for the Noahide or Ger, I think first and foremost you'd have to say Abraham. With that said, the tzaddikim, the level of tzaddik, goes to Joseph. Joseph represents Yesod, which is the symbol of purity, which makes sense here because the verse is speaking about fruitful and multiply. Right? There should be a fruitful and multiplication of the righteous. Thus, the attribute of tzaddik, Joseph, of purity, fits very well. But it fits also for the non-Jew too. Because as I mentioned in last week's Parsha class, you have a special dichotomy when we're speaking about the Messiah vis-a-vis the nations. It happened to go very well last week's Parsha class with this Tehillim. I mentioned it there. What was the Parsha? It was Kedoshim, and we mentioned the 30 Noahide laws that are explicitly referred to in Parshas Kedoshim, referred to that article in class. And the root of these 30 mitzvahs of the Noahides comes from a Gemara in Chulin, page 92, and in Midrash Rabbah, Parshas Vayechi, in conjunction with the blessings of the tribe of Judah. Now, they're basically the same idea about these 30, and the Midrash and the Gemara. There's a verse in Zechariah that says, like, for 30 there will be silver. And all the commentators in these two places want to say, what does it mean 30? I mean, I'll forget the silver, but what is this 30 in conjunction with the silver? So there's two answers. One, the 30 mitzvot, which there are 30 mitzvahs to be given to the Noahides at the time of the Messiah, from the Messiah, that even the scholarship of the Messiah is for the nations. And that's what we've been saying here. King David is charging King Solomon as such. Then they say, well, and this isn't so much of an argument, but another side of the coin is to say that the 30 means 30 righteous men of every generation from the nations of the world. Now, they're comparing it to Abraham. So you can make a very nice dichotomy. Chasidei umos ha'olam, the righteous of the nations, and that's Ger Toshav. Right? The Rambam in his laws of the Ger Toshav, Isuri Bia 14:7. Who's a Ger Toshav? He who is a Noahide, and likewise he is of the Chasidei Umos Ha'olam. And we said where the word Chasidei Umos Ha'olam come from, actually from King David also. In another psalm, and from that, the word Chasidei, the Talmud takes it to be a reference of Jewish Ger relationships, this idea. So the Ger is called Chasidei Umos Ha'olam because he is in a relationship with Israel. Now the Tzadikei, there are Tzadikei Umos Ha'olam, says that Gemara and Chulin. And that again is in reference to the 30 righteous like Abraham, and we have record that Abraham is of the Ger Tzedek quality. So Ger Tzedek, Abraham, 30, with the Tzadikei Umos Ha'olam, it looks like there's our dichotomy. The non-Jew who's a Ger Tzedek is of the Tzadikei Umos Ha'olam, and the non-Jew who emulates the idea of being the Noahide, the Ger Toshav, is the Chasidei Umos Ha'olam. So you see, it's the standard Noahide, and let's say the overachieving Noahide, or one that goes beyond the letter of the law, one that pursues circumcision, wants to do more mitzvot to the extent that he wants and is willing and able and ready for the 30 extra commandments. The other guy may be only holding at 7. It's personal preference. So there you see, but even in the terms of Chazal, the different distinction of the Chasidei Umos Ha'olam and the Tzadikei Umos Ha'olam. Here, King David is saying to King Solomon, you need to produce the Tzadikim. And we can say, obviously, that Tzadikim are the Jews of the attribute of Yesod, which stands for purity, guarding the circumcision or the covenant. And likewise, it's the nations who are equally taking their charge of righteousness as per the Tzadikei Umos Ha'olam. And we know that both are plausible here, as it's a riboy, not a mute. You don't say one or the other. It's an inclusion. King Solomon, as we said in verse 6, He's talking to the Jews, right? The Jews have to know the Torah for the nations, and all the more so, the nations have to know the Torah of the nations. All in all, you're going to want righteous men on both sides of the camp. And you see they're two totally different reasons or ways to arriving to righteousness, showing the uniqueness of both sides, yet they're coming together as a conglomerate righteous world. And along with the righteousness is the level of peace that with no end, as it says in Isaiah. Right, when the Messiah comes, there will be peace, ein kates. There will be peace without end. And peace is also, according to Yesod, that level of purity and righteousness with Joseph. And Shalom, that's the essence of the Torah of Shem, as Abraham and Shem met on Mount Zion. Abraham called Jerusalem Yirah and awe, Shem, that of peace. That coming out of the flood, the number one issue that was lacking was peace. So that's the essence of Sons of Noah 101, peace. That is the distinction of Shem Malki Tzedek. And there you see Tzedek representing that word again, righteousness. Just for adding to the fact, it's called a smachta, nice little tidbit. The end letter, or what was it? The beginning letters of the second stanza here. We said the first part is Moshe. The beginning letters of the rest of the words spells Shua B. Like the crying out of God is in me. Shua B. Or you could also say turned in me. Like God turned to me. Shua B. The turned is within me. The idea that God finds favor when we cry out to him, and when we achieve his will, he will turn to you and you will find that you are answered because you cried out to God. And one last little tidbit on this. Everybody loves this one. This is always a classic. The Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, saying of Hillel about Aaron. You guys know this one? Love peace, pursue peace, love people, and bring them close to Torah. Isn't that a good one? This is an oldie but goodie. This one never gets old, So, if that's not the message of the Noahide, I don't know what is. You say, can we learn Torah? Can we be this? Can we do that? Everybody wants to, think about it this way or that way. But look at Aaron. Love peace. Pursue peace. Love people. Bring them close to Torah. Nowhere does it say, does the halacha say we can teach them Torah? No. If you're going to bring peace to the world, then you have an obligation to love the creation, people, and bring them close to Torah. If it works for Aaron, it works for me. All right, we're going to get into overdrive a little bit more. This really is going to go fast this week. There's not much more to say after we clear this hurdle. You'll see. That was all part of verse number 7. And it says, this peace and righteousness, it should be eternal. And it mentions the idea of the moon. That, until the moon burns out, this should be. And if you remember back in verse 5, we mentioned that the will of the people is like the orbits of the moon and the planets. That when you're with the will of God, you just go. You just do his command, you don't change. So here it's like saying, you are the moon. We are the heavenly bodies in this sphere. That with righteousness and peace, we become that moon. We just follow the will of God until we burn out, which is never. That's the commentary. It's eternal. Okay, now on to verse number 8. You guys remember what it said? May he dominate from sea to sea and from river to the ends of the earth. The commentary says like this. He should rule from the seas and from the river, Pras, until the desert. And you should remember the length of the land of Israel and its width, as it states in Exodus. Placed your border from the seas and from the deserts and the rivers. Now, this is a really controversial topic. Everybody wants to say that the border is from the Nile to the Euphrates, and it fits in a certain respect. Only it's not exactly true. If the Torah was literal, and it's not, then it would work. But a lot of times, and especially with locations and bodies of water, there's another meaning. Now, one day, when the whole world recognizes God, it could be that the greater Middle East will be a greater Israel, with Israel proper in the center, and let's say the Gerim, Ger Tzedek, whatever you want to say, living all around in the Middle East area. But that's not tomorrow. And I would say, one of the top complaints that our neighbors in the Middle East have is this thinking that any moment now we're going to just go launch an offensive and take dominion from river to river. In fact, some say that the meaning of the Israeli flag, the blue stripes and the star in the middle, is that diagram. But the language for the Euphrates, pras, comes from the language, again, that we mentioned in verse 7, pru-revu, to prove, make fruitful, and revu, great. Now, anyone that has a bit of history in them will know that the Jordan River has had its moments of ups and downs. And it's to my understanding that the Jordan River is what we're talking about, at least as the starting block. Now, if it goes out like in a fractal, or let's say micro, macro, that's already something different. Let's say it starts like, in Jerusalem, and then the land of Israel, and then a greater Israel. That's fine. But the minimum must be kept from the get-go. The essential borders of the land of Israel. And it's even thought that King David sinned in a certain respect for wanting to conquer Syria before conquering the land of Israel proper. And you see, what is look at where we are in history today. The borders of the land of Israel, is that not what it's about today? And Mount Zion, and who's there, and the Torah of Zion vis-a-vis the borders, nothing changed. So it's time that we get this right. It's the Jordan River until the Mediterranean Sea, and then down until the Red Sea. Now you can call from Yam Suf ad Yam Plishtim, from the Red Sea to the Plishtim Sea, in the rivers of the Euphrates and Midbar, Pras, Hamidbar. The fact is, it is talking about Israel proper. So you have the borders of the land of Israel in truth and in fantasy. And it's the nations of the world that are flipping out over the fantasy. But let's say on the west side of the world, they're saying go for it. On the other side of the world, they're saying hold on now. The idea is that if you want to build a temple, first you must do it within the normative Israel proper. And the borders of Israel, that is what the Messianic mission is about, at least in the beginning stages. Jonah the prophet, Jonah, is an aspect of the Messiah. In fact, his soul is an important part of the greater conglomerate of the Messiah, son of Joseph. He represents the portion of prophecy to restore the borders to their proper place. Even by means of analogy, there are four major exiles: Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. And so we've been released from Egypt, but there's still kind of a stranglehold from Egypt. So don't read Mitzrayim. Read it Mitzrim, that we're struggling over the borders. Same word. And then, there's also an extension of Rome, that of Ishmael. And that's already, the Temple Mount. So you see, all the categories are here. All the categories are here. Now move on to verse number 9. May before him kneel nobles, and his foes the dust may they lick. It says that the nobles will come. Now here's some background. If you learn up on Abraham outside the land of Israel, and he gets the command of Lech Lecha, you shall go to the land of Israel. Abraham says, who am I to go? God says, I'll be with you there. If to look in the historical context, who in fact was this ancient Canaan? Now you had the world's greatest civilization right around the corner in Egypt. But yet you also had that little strip of land. And what we learned is Maisa Avos Simin Labonim. The actions of our forefathers are a sign for our offspring. And when you look through time, Israel is not an accidental place. Since you and I have been born, you can find cause of something with Israel, right? Going back 2,000 years, you're going to have a fellow claiming he's the Messiah in the advent of modern religion. So for at least the last 2,000 years, you're going to be Israel conscious as, let's say, a holy land, a special land, and you're going to have all of the ins and outs of the Vatican working about matters of Zion. 600 years later, Islam will erupt, and they're going to put their mosque up there as well. So modern history tells us that Zion and the land of Israel is a commodity and something worth having. Go back in the Second Temple, Jewish ruled. First Temple, Jewish ruled. Now you're looking at the last 3,000 years of history. And you're going to say that the entire slavery of Egypt was to get to the Holy Land given to the forefathers. That goes back to the year basically 2000. 1948, Abraham was born. Now, where the story takes hold is what happened pre-Abraham. Was Israel anything special pre-Judea? And we see in context of the Torah that it was. And particularly with Egypt at its left. Egypt looks like it was the main empire, and Israel was a sort of enlightened land. Maybe invested in purity, but there was certainly some kind of elitism going on here. That's the point of Abraham. It's a beautiful story when you put it this way. Much like we can say today, America is in charge of the West. There is a looming East. And there's this little Jewish strip in the middle that is very much a part of everybody's map. And it's not like we're putting out Tonka toys. Israel is really a player in the matters most of the world. Technology, medicine, military, thought, government, very cerebral, real things. That's what makes it such a fascinating story, is that even though it's not so much in a spiritual enlightenment going on here, but there is a certain level of enlightenment. I think anybody would have to admit that. Just to look at the achievements coming out of Israel. Not to say that it's one of these messages that, Israel's greater than everybody else in the world. That's not the point. It's that there's a great empire west from here, now and just like then. But there's a land that, let's say, the West works with, and it's an intelligent piece. That fractal looks like it's never changed. There's always been the greater empires west and east, but the strip has always had a function, a higher function. When God tells Abraham, Lech Lecha, go to the land of Israel, Abraham's attitude is, why me? I'm just the Bol Tshuva. Who am I? I just talk to God all day and think about life, and the guys in Israel are the real deal. And that's not the kind of place that you just go and storm in thinking you're going to do something. But see, that's the point, is that God tells him, you need to go to Israel and make the mark of God on Mount Zion. So Abraham goes. Now, who does he meet in Mount Zion? Zion has been serviced by a very famous king / priest. You might know him by the name of Shem Melchizedek. So there is that element of real spiritual enlightenment here. And there's always been kind of like an eternal light shining with Zion since Shem founded it back then. Shem passed the torch to Abraham. This was in the method of transfer of the entire Torah and the laws of the priesthood. Shem, as it says in Tehillim 110, Ata kohen liolam al dibarti Melchizedek. You shall be a priest forever by my word, Melchizedek. Once Abraham is here, the wisdom of truth coming from the land is a metaphysical reality. Now, you can say it's theoretical, it's a very nice story, but only it worked. This is a totally unrelated thing, but look how it works. Herzl was the visionary, they call him, of Zionism. If you read Herzl's dictionaries, but journals, he looks like a madman. And you can very easily write him off as a madman. You may even disagree with him. But when you read it, he came true. A lot of his vision of Zionism became the state that I live in today. You see it all around you. So it was a reality. Abraham going to the land of Israel was a reality. His Torah really shined in the world. So that's where verse 9 comes to tell you, may before him kneel nobles, and his foes the dust may they lick. The commentator says, they will come and subordinate themselves in their knees, kneeling before him will be noblemen. That the nobles of the deserts or faraway places will come and subordinate. They will come to the land and they will recognize the wisdom of the king. Abraham had that going on. Right? Everywhere we saw with Pharaoh, Avimelech, Abraham was seen as that Solomon king, wise man, messianic figure. The man with the truth in the land, the nobles will come and bow to him. That's the dynamic that King David is telling King Solomon. This is not a joke. Zion is not a joke. When you are in Zion and you have wisdom of the truth, the nobles of the peoples will come to you. That's how you repair the world. You'd have to start a Beis Hamikdash consciousness. The world has to know that there's light and Torah coming from Zion. And we see through history that it works. Again, when you have the borders right. You cannot be standing in Zion going, yeah, well, we're going to go conquer past India, thank God, and maybe down by Australia, and then bring down America, and hoot, let's go for South America too. You can't do that. You can't joke around. These are, again, this is the whole thing about humanity. Humanity expects to hear about humanity. Imagine I'm giving a class and I say, okay, guys, listen up. We have to have the Messiah come. And then it's going to be so great when all the money is given this way or that way. And, and we all have a Ferrari. Wouldn't you like to have a Ferrari? I like to have a Ferrari. And imagine we all have Lamborghinis because the Italians will get punished for being Romans. And we're all going to get Lamborghinis. And the Germans too. We're all going to get Mercedes-Benz for free. I mean, okay, it's a bit fantastic what I'm saying. But the point is, if the message isn't kosher and it's not right, the nations are never going to go for the message from Zion. There's no margin of error, right? If you start saying how, hey, listen, fellas, do we really need Iraq? I mean, seriously. What did Iraq ever do for me? So let's just conquer Iraq, get them out of here. Well, hello, Boker Tov. There's a world out there. Nobody wants to hear something false about their fellow man, how you're going to go conquer. No. If you remember the first 6 verses, judge with tzedek, righteousness, and mishpat, and tzedakah, and merit, and the nations have to know the truth. And you're going to go kicking them out of their home because you don't know how to learn it right. Not going to fly. But when you get the message right, says King David to King Solomon, and you're in Zion, they will come to you, the men of nobility, as a form of respect to Hashem, the King of Kings, the temple that houses the divine presence, to hear the inspired Torah of wisdom coming from above to below. And don't stop there. Verse number 10. The kings of Tarshish and the isles tribute may they return. The kings of Sheba and Seba gifts may they offer. The kings will bring a mincha. Meaning they're going to make a pit stop by the temple. Gifts will come to the land. This is not about, wow, the Jews were right. Thank God they were just right. All that was one big false alarm. They had it right the whole time. No. This is about God and His temple, and His presence, and Zion, and the blessing of Shem Melchizedek, coming all the way through to the Messiah, a worldwide unity and blessing and light, and the nations are paying tribute, not to a religion that was formulated 2,000 years ago called Yiddishkeit, due to the onset of the world's religions. This is about the Torah. And the Torah has had a plan since day one. Religion may have come into a part of it at a certain time, but at the end of the day, the nations want to come and appear before God in the temple. Now here's the best part. The nobles will come, right? We know that there's the Tzadikei Yomos Ha'olam, the righteous of the nations, the Chasidei Yomos Ha'olam. But what King David often says in Tehillim is that when the wisdom is coming out of Zion, you need signs of the end. So yeah, the message and the wisdom has to be right. Your history has to line up. You have to understand what peace is, bringing the nations close to Torah, bringing the Jews close to the nations, vice versa, having righteousness flourish. The borders of Israel must be understood, and the nobles will start to come. Now, when you start shaking the nobles from their posts of this world, things start to collapse. Positions start to change. And now you're saying kings will come. Now you're saying kings are going to come. That could mean a lot of different ways that it happens. Now here's the kicker right here. Verse 11. Prostrate themselves before him, may all the kings, may all the nations serve him. The kings will come, all the goyim will serve. What does it mean, all the goyim? Kol hagoyim. This is including the amim, the umos, every type of nation, whether the God-fearer, the God-believer, the God-interested, every type of nation will serve his malchuso, the malchus of the Messiah. I mean, the malchus means his revelation, his kingdom, his Torah vision. God basically stamps his approval on the malchus, the kingdom of the Messiah. I mean, everybody will recognize that it's the truth. And that truth will then spread through the world. As it is said, King Solomon the message will go out to the nations, judging with righteousness. The world will begin to work with his message. It's not so much that he says, I'm right, you're wrong. It's actually the other way around. The nobles will see and say, this is the way to go. The kings will come and say, this is the way to go. The biggest shocking revelation is the kings will recognize the wisdom and strengths, attributes of the Messiah, of the Torah of the Messiah and his wisdom from Zion. They will come to honor this. In the world, all of the nations, by their own volition, will follow in order to honor God. Meaning everything gets restored. When there's a restoration, you will have your king in Zion. You will have your future site of the temple in Zion. All of this will happen, let's say, according to Mazal, until it becomes built. And it'll just get more and more thick in physicality, meaning it'll become revealed. And so the world actually begins to manifest the temple. We begin to actually witness the divine presence. The kingdom of the Messiah will then become revealed as God's will. And the whole world will begin to realize this. That's how the redemption starts, according to King David. When kings start to notice, see, it's not an accident if you're a king. In the Torah literature, a king is a real thing. It's not just like Mr. Rogers, where you put a king on a puppet's head, a crown on his head. A king, a poor man, everybody has a place in Torah. And it's not a caste system. It's not a caste system at all. It's more of a recognition. The point of a non-Jewish king, our lineage of kings, or whatever it is with kings, their job is, I'll tell you what it is. A nobleman would know a Kennedy if he sat next to one, because he would know which order to place the spoons and forks on the table. You guys got that message? Right? You would, if you can recognize real etiquette, then there's a reason why you can recognize etiquette. Me, I wouldn't know from anything. I put the forks on the right, the spoons on the left, and I know it's backwards, and frankly, I don't care. I'm right-handed. I use a fork in the right hand. There's no reason to put the fork in the left. Right? But let's say that when the Kennedys are eating dinner, the person of etiquette would recognize and say, wow, hey, Sally, look, this is not an accidental meal. We must be here with some real people. They know that the forks go on the left. We're not here with the Clampets. So when there is a Messiah on the land in Zion and the wisdom is going out, you're going to find that when all the intangibles line up, the borders, the history, the peace, the nations, the righteousness, everything falls into alignment. That's when kings and noblemen and the nations will start to realize the wisdom is coming out of Zion. And then there will begin a world, basically, Techiyas HaMesim, return of the dead. There will be an arousal to come to Jerusalem, to the desire of a mincha offering, a desire to appear before God. It actually has the ability to change the world. That's why this is called the territory of Mashiach. We can talk about our maps all day long, and nice little Devar Torahs, and the way we wish it'll be, and koyach, which is power. But there's something called poil, putting it into action. When we get this thing right, that we're all a part of today, eventually, it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen a prayer service in the Sephardi shul. They all sit and daven and pray quietly in their place. And the altar stands naked. And just before we get to the Shema and the morning blessings, it's like there's no leader. Everyone's kind of, mumbling in their own places. Then you see one of the guys stand up, and he goes and he takes charge with an authoritative voice. He comes up and he says the prayer. And now we know, now we're starting. And he gives, the whole Kaddish, Yiskadel, he goes the whole thing. All of a sudden there's a leader. And boom, we're in the Kriya Shema. Boom, now we're going to daven Shmona Esrei. Boom, now we're reading the Torah. Boom, now we're done. Where'd that come from? That's how this works. Eventually, there will be an arousal. Some kind of spiritual awakening will go out of Zion. Kings will notice. Noblemen will notice. Temple awareness in the hearts will arise. And the perfected Torah will start to congregate and go out into the world. That is called the territory of the Mashiach. Thank you for listening to class number 7. Stay tuned next week, class number 8, verse number at least 12. We might do a whole tangent next week as well. I don't know what it's looking like. I didn't look ahead. So what do we talk about? The Messiah is King in the aspect of King Solomon being told by King David. You need to understand what is righteousness, and it will flourish. Understand what is peace in the nations coming to Torah. It will flourish. Understanding the blessing of peace in the world. It will flourish. Understand what is Israel. So you have the whole world. Now you have the whole land of Israel. And know what it is. Know the Temple Mount. Know Zion. And know that once you stand there and the truth comes out, the special function of standing in Zion with the truth, the world begins to notice. And that will mandate the beginning of the building of the third temple. Thank you very much. Have a great week. And stay tuned.